with me, Natasha Davies, head of the nursing team, Doctors Without Borders. Thank you for your time and for being with us.
No problem.
Before we start, and I will ask you about the situation, the field hospital you work in, I would like to ask you about undescribable images we've seen in the recent days. Pictures of children looking like skeletons. Do you have starvation cases in your clinics and field hospital? And also, how many patients with malnutrition do you admit to your hospital?
Sure. So I'm responsible for the nursing activities within the primary healthcare clinic that's based in Khan Yunis. And there we do screening for malnutrition in the under fives and the pregnant and breastfeeding women, because they're the priority population, whilst most of the population is malnourished and starving, to be honest, but they're obviously the most at-risk populations. So we do screening of them. And then we follow patients, or we provide some supplements for them, which is not enough. It's, it doesn't replace real food with real vitamins and real protein, but it does at least allow them to survive, essentially. So we send them home with a number of packets of these, and then they come back to the clinic every week or every 2 weeks, and we remeasure the middle of their humerus, and that gives us a reading of how malnourished they are. And we continue to follow them up with supplies when they are available, because this is the other problem, is that even nutritional supplements that are desperately needed are often in a critical supply. So yeah, I see them every day, more within the primary healthcare clinic than at the field hospital, because the field hospital is primarily a trauma surgical hospital. So whilst we operate on pediatric patients, we don't see the younger ones, which are obviously the most at risk.
And you've been in Gaza for 2 weeks. How has the situation changed during that time?
So I think certainly looking at the data that I've been reviewing in the clinic, the levels of moderate and severe acute malnutrition in the populations that I explained, less than 5 and pregnant and breastfeeding women, have almost tripled. MSF published some data, I think this week, saying that basically 25% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip of less than 5 and pregnant and breastfeeding women are malnourished to some degree. So it's just sort of, it's already was getting worse, and now I think we're reaching increasing levels.
And can you please describe what does the lack of food do to the human body, especially children?
I mean, it has a devastating effect. Children have a much higher metabolic rate because they are growing so much faster. They're laying down more tissue. They just need way more calories than we do as adults. They're also living in terrible conditions, with the majority of the population displaced. So living in tents, living in shelters on the beach or wherever they can find bits of land. So their living conditions, they're more exposed to gastrointestinal diseases, respiratory diseases. And when you are malnourished, your natural immune system, it just has no energy. It cannot fight off these simple things that we would just shake off, if we were in our respective countries. The other impact it has, probably primarily for us, is because of the surgical hospital. Every patient has a wound of some description. Now, that could be a gunshot wound, it could be a fracture, it could be horrendous injuries from shrapnel or explosions, it could be huge burns. All damaged tissue needs even more nutrition, vitamins and protein to actually heal. And what we're seeing is it's taking a prolonged amount of time to heal. Some fractures are just so where you've got, the break in the bone just is never actually, it's called non-union. Things are just not healing.
Mm. And according to the UN, 10,000 people, including several thousand children, are awaiting urgent life-saving medical evacuation. Do you also have such patients, and what are these cases?
Yeah, that one, we at the field hospital, we don't have anyone fitting that criteria. Some of my other MSF colleagues in different facilities I can't speak for them, but certainly for us, no, we're not awaiting any of the evacuation patients, thankfully.
And you also treat children. What kind of injuries do they have?
So they have all the same as the adults, unfortunately. Gunshot wounds through limbs, just catastrophic, life-changing injuries that no child should ever have to endure. So the other night, I think it was an explosion. So I had two siblings, both come in with amputations. So both had lost their lower legs following explosions. Gunshot wounds, as I say, burns, not just from the explosions that then often create fires because everyone is living in either plastic or wooden shelters. So if there's even just a spark from, shrapnel, explosion, then this just creates horrendous fires. So we often see children with severe burns. And plus also, again, the fact that they're living in displaced conditions, people are cooking in cramped conditions. The list just goes on and on, unfortunately.
And can you accept all patients who come to your hospital, or do you have to turn them away due to the lack of beds?
Unfortunately, so our bed capacity is 90. Since I've been here, we've never been less, I don't think, than at least 105, 115, I think 117 at our worst. That was this week. We try and make space. We have to deliver not the best standard that we would like. Sometimes we just have to put people on mattresses, which is not what we would normally do. But the MOH, the Ministry of Health hospitals, are equally as overwhelmed. Our fellow NGOs, so there's other facilities down the road, the coastal road, they're also at breaking point. So we will never turn anyone away. We just wouldn't do that from a medical ethics point of view. We would just deliver the initial treatment that's required, stabilize them, maybe put tourniquets on, stop bleeding, wrap them up as best they can, and then we'll coordinate with either Ministry of Health hospitals or with our fellow international field hospitals and work out what we can do for these patients. But yeah, unfortunately, the hospital is always very cramped. It's always very busy. We're doing about 30 to 40 operations a day. And sometimes they're so complex that we're not even getting through them in a day. We have operations still going throughout the night. The list is just endless of people requiring surgical intervention because of the situation, unfortunately.
And how this recent aid blockade influenced the medical sector? What is the situation of hospitals? What are the urgent needs?
It's huge. I mean, you can talk about big items, you can talk about small items. The things like packets of sterile gauze that we use for cleaning and absorbing of blood, we use in theatre in vast amounts. And sometimes we don't have enough, so we have to sterilize unclean gauze to make it sterile within our own facility. And that's just unheard of. It just leads to huge delays in the operations. It just adds to the manpower that's required to do that. And it's just such a simple item, like you just take it for granted when you're, back in your home country, that you have sterile gauze to be able to do procedures. The other thing we're really lacking is what we call X-Fix. So they're the external fixators that join together, stabilize the broken bones, and they sit on the outside of your limbs. At the moment, we're in absolutely dire shortage of these. And because we see so many fractures, every patient basically needs an external fixator. We're currently in negotiations with all other organizations, seeing who has them, seeing if we can share or we can get some from someone else. But these are just essential items that we can't provide a service without these things. I mean, and then that's let alone all of the equipment that when it breaks, spare parts aren't allowed inside. So if you can't source the spare part to fix, let's say, an X-ray machine or an ultrasound machine, some urgent medical equipment, then it renders it useless and you've lost the ability, to take X-rays and other useful medical equipment. So yeah, it impacts every single aspect of our work.
And what is the psychological and physical condition of the medical staff also. A few days ago, I've heard a statement of one of your doctors who said, we were the ones helping malnourished people, but now we are unable to work. We are so weak because he said, like, I cannot even afford to eat one meal per day. I eat one meal in 3-4 days.
Yeah, I mean, the effect on our Palestinian colleagues is horrific, but their level of humanity throughout it all is really humbling. But the situation that they're in is just awful. Particularly last week, when the organization that provides food for our staff was at such shortage that they couldn't provide for the staff. So they still were able to provide just enough for the patients, but the staff were unable to eat, which is just awful. You know, they're working 8 or 16-hour shifts, day or night, depending. And sometimes this was the only possibility for them to get a meal. And, you know, healthcare work is exhausting, whether you're a nurse, a surgeon, delivering care, everything. It uses up so much calories and mental energy, and it's just horrific to see them having to go through a whole shift and receiving nothing, and then knowing that when they get home, likelihood is they don't have anything there either. They look tired, they look hungry, to the point where a couple of my staff said to me, we're going to have to go to the GHF sites because we need food. I need to feed my family. And I was just like, but you know how dangerous they are. And they were like, Dad, but what choice do I have? I'm not going to let my children starve. I mean, they always prioritize the children above themselves, always. But yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking to see, particularly when it's so needless.
And aid organizations, UN, say that the current aid drops or the few hundred trucks more aren't enough to stop mass starvation in Gaza, with months of malnutrition, diseases and injuries. Do you think, like, you cannot treat mass starvation with energy bars, from the air? There must be some humanitarian corridors, but the aid reaching people on the ground, distributed in specific way to address their needs. How would you comment that and the situation now?
I agree with what you say. I mean, these airdrops are utterly ineffective. They're dangerous. And for me, they're also quite cynical. They're very much a smoke and mirrors type approach. So the world has condemned the lack of aid and food getting in, and this is the default approach, which is not only dangerous, incredibly dangerous, like you say, it doesn't provide anywhere near enough aid. Like, it's probably half of what you would get on a normal truck, if that. We have the roads, we have the trucks, we have the things. Why can you not just let things in via the road? And the Israeli authorities need to just help facilitate the easy entry. Because even today, there was a drop close to our field hospital, so all the staff are obviously out watching. Potentially, it could have landed on the field hospital for a start, endangering patients and staff. If it lands in an area, everybody rushes to it because obviously everybody is so desperate. Everybody is starving. So it creates this panic and everybody rushes. Sometimes there are gunshots. So it just creates more injuries. And then people have actually been injured by the pallets themselves. There was a parachute malfunction that I witnessed myself, where the whole pallet just came absolutely flying down. Now, if you're in a tent, how do you even know that that's above you? And that's not even accounting for if the aid falls in a evacuated area, that the Israeli forces have said no one gets into. What do people do? They're not going to stay out. They're going to risk their lives again to try and access what's in these pallets, which, like you commented, is pitiful compared to what could arrive on a truck.
And during our interview, you are hearing all the time the drones in the air. Do you see these humanitarian pauses that Israeli side said will be established to provide more aid and more let more trucks into Gaza?
Yes, yeah, sorry about the drone. For me, I can only speak from what I see. It's made no difference to the amounts of injuries, the types of injuries, and the types of patients that we're still receiving in all of our facilities. Yeah, that's as much as I can say on that.
Is there any particular situation or phase that you treated, you met, and you cannot forget and you won't forget?
I mean, sadly, I'm struggling, but not to pick one because there's not so many, but actually because there's already in 2 weeks, and my last time here, hundreds upon hundreds. I mean, it's probably the ones that involve children because my background is a pediatric nurse. It's the injuries that just wipe out an entire family and normally leave a child as the sole survivor with catastrophic life-altering injuries, usually involving an amputation of one or two limbs. And I think for me, they're just the most devastating because childhood should be such an innocent, fun time. And for these Palestinian children, generally their life under occupation, but certainly these past 21 months, their life has been no childhood that you would wish on anyone.
What can you see from where you are in Gaza? What we cannot see being outside, what we cannot understand,
I think thanks to reputable news agencies, I think the world is seeing what we're seeing, to be honest, now. I think at the beginning it was difficult with people trying to understand what was fake news and what was real, but I feel like the overwhelming images and stories that are coming out of Gaza, now the world is literally, apart from obviously the lower level and how it affects every single family, there's not a family or an adult or a child that I meet that isn't affected by hunger, malnutrition, not being able to access appropriate healthcare. But essentially, we see what you see, these starving children, these malnourished children, these injuries that maybe you don't get to see, obviously, the full extent of on television. But sadly, no, I feel like there actually isn't. Everything's out there now, and it just bemuses me how governments have not been more compelled to put pressure and sort of try and encourage and force things like stopping the genocide. I find it hard to understand.
Natasha Davies, head of nursing team, Doctors Without Borders, thank you so much for your time. And
no problem at all.
Stay safe.
Thank you.